The Week in Bible Prophecy, a Prophecy Watchers podcast.
Welcome to the program today. Mono Gonzalez here in studio, and we have got a great program for you. We are going to be here talking with Dr. Ken Johnson and Josh Peck about a very interesting topic, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Essene calendar, what's coming up in 2025 and 26. You are not going to want to miss it. Before we go to these esteemed gentlemen, I want to remind everybody about our upcoming Colorado conference, which is going to be June 27th through the 29th in Colorado Springs. You can go to prophecywatchers.com and get all the information that you need there. Also want to remind you that if you can't join us in beautiful Colorado, that we are going to be live streaming the event. Again, you can get information there. We have a couple other events I want to remind you about. I will be going to Greece on a Eastern Mediterranean cruise with Billy Crone and Tom Hughes and a few others. And we're going to be doing some prophecy talks and lectures on the ship, as well as seeing Athens and Corinth and other spots. Basically a missionary tour of where Paul went. And so if you want information about that, that is going to be in October. Again, prophecywatchers.com. If you go to the events tab and just scroll down, you'll see places where you can find the information to get about that special trip. It'll be fun. And one last thing, we are gearing up as well for a prophecy conference in Branson, Missouri. Yeah, it's going to be a great time, and you can find information on our website as well. So lots of things going on. As we know, the world is changing very fast, and prophecy conferences are a great way to stay not only informed, but also to hang out with others. I mean, really, that is one of the goals, is to fellowship with others who are like-minded. And thinking of like-minded, gentlemen, both of you, welcome.
Thank you. How you doing?
I remember, I took a class on Qumran in seminary, and so I've always loved the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so to sit here with you guys is great to talk about some of these things. And I think for our audience, maybe Josh, why don't you start with you for a second. Help our audience. Let's say they don't know anything about you. Mm-hmm. What have you done, and what have you written about the Dead Sea Scrolls and Qumran? And then I'll ask you the same thing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've been studying it not as long as Dr. Ken Johnson has, but he was actually the one that really got me into the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so I wrote my first book about it, which was Lost Prophecies of Qumran, and I started writing that in 2020. And now I just got the final draft done. I'm working on an updated and expanded version called Forgotten Prophecies of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that one, it gets a lot more in-depth with some of the amazing prophecies, and also the history of the Essenes, who were the writers and keepers of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Not every Essene had anything to do with the writing. That was some of the scribes. But it gets into all that history, gets into prophecies that they had during their time, which they called the Age of Torah, and our time, which they actually called the Age of Grace, which is really phenomenal stuff. So I think people are going to get a lot out of that.
Awesome. And Dr. Ken here, you've written certainly a lot about it. And what kind of got you into this? And then, of course, you kind of, I wouldn't call it a hobby, it's been your joy. Mm-hmm. Talk about what got you into it, and also kind of the breadth of what you've written.
Well, I started when I became a Christian in my teenage years, and then I realized after going to different churches that they taught different things, different denominations. So I got to the point where I looked up the early church fathers to find out what they taught about all the different things we disagree with, just for my own peace of mind, to find out what was proper doctrine. And in the process of doing that, they talked about Enoch and scrolls and several things like that. Then I got recently the ability to go look at the entire collection of Dead Sea Scrolls and look at them, translate them, see what I thought, compare them from a Christian standpoint, and found out that they had a lot of extra biblical commentaries, prophecies, mainly about the first coming, but completely accurate. And then there's things about the second coming. So I just wanted to pull them all together, because I've always been fascinated with prophecy also. So that's why I do what I do. Mm-hmm.
When you think about the Dead Sea Scrolls, originally began to be discovered in 1947, or right around the establishment of the State of Israel. Maybe let's talk about that. We know that, at least in the New Testament, we have the Pharisees, we have the Sadducees, we have the Herodians, we have the Zealots. You have these different political parties. And the New Testament does not mention this group known as the Essenes. And so where do we, Josh, tell us kind of, and get kind of go back and forth here. This will just be fun. Where do we learn about the Essenes at all? If not from the New Testament, where do we hear about them?
Yeah, one of the first mentions that we get, if not the first mention, is in Josephus. And Essene is just a word that means healer. So we don't see that in the New Testament, but we see it in extra biblical works like Josephus and lots of other places. They're actually written about quite extensively, like in Hippolytus. Which actually, in my new book, I do include all of that as appendices. There's 8 appendices in the new book with all these ancient church fathers that talked about the Essenes and ancient historians and stuff. And now that's a good question though. Like in the New Testament, do you see a correlation, Ken, between if there was a group mentioned, who would the Essenes be? Would that be the scribes, or who do you think?
The scribes were a different group, but generally they were referred to as just the Jews. And the interesting thing about that is when you actually go back and pull it all together, there are several Essenes in Scripture.
Yeah.
According to the church fathers and the Dead Sea Scrolls both. Simeon, who sacrificed, or not sacrificed, but circumcised our Lord, apparently was a teacher of the school of the prophets and therefore an Essene. They kept that whole order. Another one is when Paul and Barnabas were anointed to go forth. It said the Holy Spirit wanted them to go forth on missionary trips, and it said that 3 prophets came down from Antioch, and it names them. One of them was Menachem, or Manian as it is in Greek. And we have his whole history of him being with the Essene order and actually leaving the Sanhedrin because of becoming a believer. And it's really fascinating to see that whole thing, all the history behind it.
Was that the same individual that had that prophecy about Herod?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that. Don't leave the audience out. What prophecy of Herod, talk about.
Yeah, so there was an Essene named Menachem that had when Herod was basically a kid. He was a lot younger.
We're talking about Herod the Great here.
Yeah, he had this prophecy that he would be a great king, but then eventually become corrupt. Well, when Herod actually became king, he brought Menachem, to him and said, okay, well, what now? And how long is my reign going to last and all that? And he told him. And that was one of the amazing things about the Essenes is that they're recorded as having 100% perfect prophecy. And that's just one small example. But yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and when you read in Acts, it talks about how this is Manian or Menachem, the one that was in Herod's household. So just to let you know, we're talking about the same guy. The fascinating part about that is it's not even really that hard. They're known to be prophets, but if you know the prophecies about the one that betrays the Christ is an Idumean, and then you're looking at Rome going, we tried Pharisees, that didn't work. We tried Sadducees, that didn't work. We're going back and forth, and so the next logical place might be one of these 5 guys. One's an Idumean. Well, that's him. I mean, it's pretty obvious. You can go back through and look at all these things and see how you could just figure it out almost after the prophecies are given. It's fascinating.
So, and we know that the Josephus mentions that the Essenes were not just out in the desert.
Right.
They
were all over.
They were all over the place, and so I think he lists they numbered in the thousands. And so let's talk about that. We know as well, the first century, 100 BC. We see, even before that, the Maccabean revolt, and then we see all of the Hasmonean dynasty, and that connection that happens in this 100 years, basically 100 BC down to 0, if you want to say it that way. But let's talk about the time frame. The Essenes, in the sense of what do we know as it relates to their origination and their time frame and their extensive, even maybe a little bit of a history, how they rebelled against the Jerusalem, group. Talk about that. Okay.
Go for it.
Basically, their story is that Jews were Jews, and when we came back with Ezra, everybody believed in a Messiah, him dying for our sins. It's just basic 101 Judaism. Then cults rose up for different reasons and became known as Pharisees and Sadducees. Somehow the cults took over the government and then ousted them. There was even these targeted assassinations, and they had to go to Egypt for a while until the Daniel prophecy about Rome stepping in and creating a peace. And at that point, they were supposed to go back into Israel and prepare the way of the Messiah. So it was all set in their mind what they should do. So if you look at it like that, Judaism is the same as Christianity. It has the same doctrine. And when they don't, because it's Pharisees and Sadducees, it's basically because a cult rose up and kind of took everything over. So their basic idea is that stuff started around the 200s BC and kind of came in waves, and then they had the dispersion and the comeback. And there's a whole lot of history that they give. They say that there's actually a book with everybody's genealogies and the events in Shemitahs and Jubilees throughout all of time that they have. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, and one of the major things that caused the split was the issue with the calendar. So probably around the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, 4th, maybe 5th, but probably the 4th. They came in and they said, okay, well, basically we'll let you do some of your Jewish stuff, but you have to adopt our lunar calendar, because before that they had a solar one, the one that they said that God gave to them. And there was a big split there. So the people that would become the Essenes said that they weren't going to do that, so they left. And then the ones that stayed and said, okay, we'll change our calendar, they changed to this pagan lunar calendar.
So the Greeks, you're saying that the Greeks were imposing on them a lunar calendar?
Yeah, yep. And it's interesting because you can look at the history of the Seleucid Empire, and they have a calendar that's basically the same as the lunar calendar that they ended up adopting, so you can kind of pinpoint where this was. But according to the Essenes, that was a major sin, because there were certain rituals that had to be done on specific days, and if you don't have the proper calendar, you're going to miss the days. And we know with some of those things, if you do them wrong, you could lose your life. And what's really interesting is there's actual records where it was like before that time, out of all of history, there was maybe 18 priests or something like that have ever died. But then after that happened, it jumped up to like 300 that died because they were doing these rituals and things on the wrong days. They were doing them wrong. So that was one of the main things that caused this big division. But what's amazing is that original solar calendar was perfect, and it fits with the Bible. So when we get day counts, like prophetic day counts with the 2 witnesses, or even things where it says, on the 3rd day of the month this happened. Well, it's mentioning it for a specific reason. And now that we know what that calendar is, and now that we have that calendar, thanks largely to people like Ken Johnson, who I wouldn't be able to put all that together, but we can actually see, like, okay, it says this specific day. We can look and see if it falls on a festival day or something like that. And even prophetically, it answers amazing questions. There's a big debate. Do the 2 witnesses come in the first half or second half of the tribulation? Well, in my mind, that's settled now. It has to be the first half. And I go into the book as to why. It has to do with they had what's called a leap week every 5 or 6 years. When you look at the prophetic day counts of the 2 witnesses, or of all the other stuff in the second half of the tribulation, it all fits perfectly. So in the second half, there's probably not a leap week there. In the first half, the 2 witnesses stuff, it makes a lot more sense if you have that extra week, because then you start seeing festival days that line up with them. And so in my mind, they have to come in the first half of the tribulation. So things like, and there's other reasons too why that's the case, where you don't need the calendar for that. But it's little things like that, like just knowing those day counts, having the calendar, and being able to actually count it out. It's explosive. It's amazing in terms of prophecy.
So how do we when we think about, at least in the Bible, that the month begins on the new moon? Mm-hmm. So that's very lunar, right?
Not exactly.
So yeah, explain that, because again, you see,
there's a specific word for moon, and there's a specific word for new month. Mm-hmm. And if you're using a lunar calendar, it would be one and the same. Mm-hmm. But when you go through the scriptures in the Old Testament and the New Testament Greek, the Greek and the Hebrew both, it's actually the word for new month. So it doesn't really say new moon.
So yeah, chodesh, right? I mean, mm-hmm. so you have. So that's very important, because again, here you have this, I would say, I don't know, maybe it's forced on the text, that Chodesh is this idea of a new moon, mm-hmm. rather than a new month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's really important that way. Along with what you were saying, one thing I thought was fascinating is we had the Yom Kippur War, and in 1973, and we just had the war started with Hamas last year. So when you look at the dates of when they start, it's not the same date on the Gregorian, the modern Jewish calendar, the Arabic calendar, or any other calendar, but on the Dead Sea Scroll calendar, it's the exact same day. And that's just one, and you could say that's a coincidence. But when you start seeing all those kind of coincidences, that's what makes it really interesting to look in the study of prophecy and other things.
So let's talk about then the debate that's happening in the sense, we have the state of Israel. Here they are. What is it? Year 5784 or something like that, right? Whatever the year is. But yet, that is based on a Pharisaical calendar. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about these two, for those that might not know anything about this. Like, well, yeah, but I know. I follow the Jews. I follow Israel. I'm a supporter of Israel, and that's fine. But their calendar says it's 5784 or whatever. But what's this idea with the Essene calendar? Let's talk about the differences there. Where did it originate from? This difference.
The major place there's an ancient Pharisee document called the Seder Olam. It's a historical book. It dates from about 160 AD, and it talks about the fact that at one particular point, there was a rabbi named Yoshi that didn't want people to associate Daniel chapter 9 with the coming of Messiah. So he said the prophecy in Daniel 9 is from the going forth to rebuild a Jerusalem, that command, to the destruction of that temple. Now that's only 40 years difference, and of course you can't do that. He was kind of laughed out, but he came up with two other theories about how that would, and he changed the era of the Persians, changed the dates on that stuff. And still, no one liked it because you just can't do that. But then there was the dispersion and all the other stuff. So then what happens in the second or third century, Rabbi Hillel recreated the calendar, and all of a sudden we have this missing 167 years. And so from that time forward, we've had the lunar calendar with that number on it. And if you go back to the Talmud, which actually quotes the Seder Olam as accurate history, you can see that they quote it, they look at it as legitimate, but they still hold on to the other system. So we've got actual written documents on how and where those dates changed.
I think it's important too to remember that during this time, there was a great amount of even really the first century into the second century. We think about Justin Martyr. There was a great level of Christian evangelism or Messianic evangelism by Jews, by Messianic Jews. Of course, as we know, the first Christians were Jews. And so you have this history, and even Justin Martyr in his book, the second century, he's talking with Trypho the Jew, right? And he's having this discussion, and he's talking about Messianic prophecy. And so there was a lot of success as it relates to winning over people who were Jewish based on Messianic prophecy. And so you do see this rabbinic movement that ended up seeking to change even the text, the Masoretic text, as well as these others, in order to make it not possible for Jesus to be the Messiah. And so to think in terms of, it might have been, and I think it is true in ancient times, there was such for the scribes and others, the transcribers, who would copy these Hebrew texts. They were very serious and respectful. But later, when you have such success going on with Jesus being received and so obviously, right, fulfilling Messianic prophecy, that the early rabbis were like, again, after Jesus died in first, second century, we need to fix this. We need to change this. We need to limit the opportunity for Jesus to be seen as the Messiah. I mean, there's definitely so this comes into play then as it relates to the calendar issues.
Oh yeah, for sure, and it's really interesting too, because going along with that, in academia, there's this big mystery, like what happened to the Essenes? They just disappeared and they left all of their scrolls behind. Well, one thing that, and this was something new that I learned that I didn't write about in the first book, but it's in the second book, is there was an ancient custom, I guess you could call it, or ritual, where they looked at the text as so holy, they weren't just, if they were done with them, or they weren't just going to throw them away. So they would actually like bury them or put them in pots and put them in caves, and so they would do that. So that's probably why a lot of those were left behind. But the Essenes were the early Christians. Those were most likely the ones that, when you read through the Gospels, there are some times where Jesus just like walks into a room and everybody gets saved, basically. But then there are other times he's saying everything he can say and he just can't make headway with some people. Well, I think that's the difference between who's the Essene and who's the Pharisee or Sadducee, because the Essenes had all these really specific prophecies of what to look for with the Messiah. They knew exactly what it was. They knew that the Messiah was going to be, come in two stages, first coming and second coming. And the Pharisees had a different interpretation of that. They thought it was going to be two different people. And so when they saw all this happening, they knew it and they got saved immediately. Well, those are also the ones that took the Great Commission seriously. And I think, and they also knew there was this prophecy about the temple being destroyed. They knew they had to get out anyway. But they were the first Christians. We come from the Essenes. They went out, they took what scrolls they could, buried the rest, and went out and preached the gospel to the world, and we're the benefactors of that. And to me, just the fact that we have that rich of history that most of the church doesn't know about, and actually a lot of Jewish people unfortunately don't know about either. Just the fact that that's there is just mind blowing.
Let's talk about what a lot of people want to talk about, and I think because we all think we are all guilty of loving dates. I mean, whether it's date setting, whether it's date suggesting, or maybe it's just hopeful. I mean, I would love to know the date of the rapture or the date of the arrival of the second coming. And so let's talk about the 2025 date. Okay, there's this date. It's not just manufactured out of thin air. Why? Again, for the average person that doesn't do this like what you guys do in the sense of, study full time and everything, why should 2025 have any significance at all? Let's talk about that.
Well, basically, just really quickly, they have a calendar, and their concept is there are 7,000 years between the creation.
This is the Essenes have a calendar.
Essenes,
okay.
Yeah, between the creation in Genesis and the creations of a new heaven and a new earth. So that encompasses 6,000 years of man's history and a millennial reign. They have that all mapped out. So theoretically, if that's correct, the last 1,000 years starts in the year 6,000, and they divide these into Jubilee periods, 50-year periods, which sometimes they call generations. And so with this, they mark the age of creation, the age of Torah, and the age of grace, and then a millennial reign. So not trying to set dates per se, but on their calendar, that last part should start in the year 6,000. So the last generation or the last 50-year period from before the year 6,000 would start in 2026. So the year 2025 is the Jubilee or the 50th year of a 50-year period. And so a lot of the scrolls talk about the fact that prophecy can happen at any time, but the bulk of prophecies occur at the change of the ages and the change of the Jubilee periods. So when we're looking at that and we think about Jesus talking about the last generation, that kind of thing, we see that a lot of prophecies will probably happen in 2026 to 2075. Now, like I would have guessed the war with Hamas would have started a couple years from now.
Yeah, in the future.
But it actually started, last year.
Yep. So in thinking about this, I know, my background's in the ancient Near East, and so you have the biblical chronology, the kings and everything else, and they do a lot in regnal years, and fifth year of such and such. Well, in thinking about that, you have the trying to connect with an absolute date, in the sense of especially connecting with Egypt. Egypt is very helpful when you look about the different dynasties of Egypt. So in that case, you have whether it's the Egyptian chronology or even the biblical chronology, here you have the Essene chronology. So you have these different calendars out there. I guess for us, we're sitting here living in the Gregorian chronology, right?
Right.
So, Josh, how do we anchor? How do you anchor the Essene calendar anywhere connected with the Gregorian calendar, which will allow us to understand why we're in 2025? Well, shouldn't 2,000 years been there? So where does it anchor at?
Yeah, there are definitely differences, but Ken has actually developed a really wonderful free tool on a website called dsscalendar.org, where it superimposes the Essene calendar right onto our Gregorian calendar. So you could look at and it does it for year to month to day. We also do have a print version that he and I worked on together. If people are interested in that, if they want to hang it on their wall. But it's a free resource, and you can use that to see, like, okay, so today's, this date, what would that be on the Essene calendar? So that helps out a lot too. So then you don't have to do a bunch of math every single time you want to figure it out. And one thing that I wanted to mention too about the prophecies being in the last Jubilee, and the final Jubilee of the age of Torah, so their ages would be 2,000 years apiece, and then there's a final Sabbath age that's only 1,000 years. We would call that the millennial reign of Christ. Well, at the last 50 years of the age of Torah, that was between 25 AD and 75 AD, according to our understanding of the count, or 76 AD. But it's in that time period. Well, the rapture is only one prophecy. There's a lot of prophecies that we have that's going to happen before Jesus returns and sets things straight for the millennial reign. Well, when you think about that, 25 AD, Jesus came the first time probably around 29, 30 AD, somewhere around there.
Starting his ministry.
Yeah, starting his ministry. And then look at all of the prophecies that got fulfilled in a really short amount of time until he was killed in 32 AD in the indwelling of the Holy Spirit and all that. And then finally you get a few decades where things happen too until the destruction of the temple. But all of that really important stuff that sets the stage for the next age, they didn't have to wait till 75, 76 AD for that to occur. That happened pretty early in the final Jubilee of the Age of Torah. So while we can't put a specific date, we could say that, yeah, according to the Essene calendar, 2076 should be the first day of the new age, if their calendar is correct and if it continues the way that we think it's going to. But that doesn't mean that we have to wait all that time, or even 7 years before that necessarily, for the rapture. There's a lot of different ways that this could pan out. We could have an early rapture, and you could have a gap between the rapture and the tribulation. That's one possibility. You could also have a gap between the end of the tribulation and when the next age starts. How long is it going to take for Jesus to judge everybody? How long is it going to take to set the world up and to build the amazing temple and city that we read about at the end of Ezekiel? Which, of course, we all believe that's all totally literal. It's not figurative. Well, that stuff takes time, and I don't think Jesus is just going to come down, stamp his fingers, and everything's different. I think that stuff is going to have to be built. So we don't necessarily have to wait that long. We can't put a date on the rapture, of course. There's nothing in the Dead Sea Scrolls saying any kind of date or anything like that. It's really consistent with biblical theology. There's little hints of the rapture throughout it, but it doesn't give us a date. So we don't know. But so the dates that we have are more about a time frame rather than a specific date. So we're looking at a 50-year time frame where a lot of things could happen early on, just like it did at the end of the Age of Torah. So I think that can kind of help hopefully relieve some people when they hear 2075. I got to wait that long. I'm not going to live that long.
Let's talk about that because I just like to throw things out. That's where my mind works. So we know on the Gregorian calendar that we are, if Jesus, most New Testament scholars believe Jesus was crucified and resurrected on 32 or 33 AD. Okay, that's the kind of those 2 years. Some people will say 29, but that's not. The best date is that 32, 33 framework. Okay, so I don't think we've lost too much understanding in our calendar. What I mean by that is here, let's fast forward to 2032. So here we got 8 years from now. Well, it's pretty solid then that there's 2,000 years going from the time of Jesus to this period from 32 AD to 2032. And that's an age. That's an age, right? I mean, according to the Essene not calendar, but according to the Essene chronology of 2,000 years being an age. So is it possible, and we also know that again, 70 AD the temple was destroyed. So are things based? Could it be off? Could have the new age began at the time of Jesus' resurrection, and then the temple gets destroyed 40 years later in the still new age of grace? Could there be? Is it off? Could it be by 40 years off? Because here's what I'm saying is that if let's say we come to 2075, and we'll still be here, Lord willing, maybe. Okay, that's 40 years from now. Oh no, it's longer than that. It's 50 years. No, maybe I won't be here. Okay, but let's say we're sitting here and we're old and decrepit by that time at 2075. Now we're looking, hey, it's been 2,040 years from the time of Jesus' resurrection. That seems a little bit weird, doesn't it? That you would have not 2,000, you would have 2040. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, so the way that I understand it, they would have a specific date as the beginning of the next age, even if it doesn't specifically line up with anything prophetic on that date. So their final Jubilee in the Age of Torah would have started 25 AD. And I don't know that there was anything specific that occurred there. Now we would say, well, the church age began in 32, 33 AD with the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. And yeah, it did. That's when like the church really started.
And we're coming up to 2,000 year anniversary.
Mm-hmm. But the specific age in the way that they lined out their chronology would have been 25 to 75. So the way that I kind of explain it in the book is it seems like in these final 50-year periods, and you can even see this in every age. You see this in the first age too with the Tower of Babel and Call of Abraham and all that, but it seems like there's this period of time where prophecies start to happen to get ready for the next age, so that when that 75, 76 AD date hits, everything is set in place for the next age to begin, even if some of that started early. So it would be like if I was going to throw a birthday party next Friday. Well, I have some things to prepare before then. So I got to get a cake. Maybe I do that tomorrow. I got to get the presents. I got to hire attractions. And I would spend the rest of this week like doing all that. So I'm doing things to get ready for the party, but that's not specifically the party, even though they're all going to play important roles when the party happens. So that at Friday at 3 o'clock, let's say, the party happens. I think it's kind of the same way. So the way that I look at it, these final Jubilee periods, it's almost as if these two ages are kind of like melding together, where you get the start of one while the other one's winding down. And so you get this kind of blending thing. So I don't think that we would say necessarily that, well, since 32 AD, that was the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, so that's the start of that age. I don't think the Essenes would have saw it like that. That would have been one prophetic thing that happened in that age.
At the tail end
to prepare for the next age. Mm-hmm. But the official start would have been 75, 76 AD. But that's also why it's really difficult to put exact set dates on this. It's more of like time periods that we look at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the thing that I would add to that is I think we can rock solid set dates for their calendar system.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the prophecies on it. Mm-hmm. So for instance, on their system, which ends at 75, they talked about the first coming of the Messiah when he would atone for our sin nature. And the event that would occur is one Shemitah after the end of the 9th Jubilee of that Ona. And so if you look at the end of the age being 75 minus a whole Jubilee period, which is 25, and then you go forward a Shemitah, which is a 7-year period, it brings us to 32. So they're saying it's scroll 11Q13, they're saying that the Messiah would take care of our sin nature 32, 33 AD is what we would put on our calendar. So that, lets it sink in really, really well, give or take a year. And so that means the end of their calendar year for the year 6000 would be 75 or 76, 2075, 2076. So I think that's pretty rock solid. As far as the other prophecies, like he's saying, you've got Jesus being born, 30 years later dying, the church age starting several years later, the destruction of the Jerusalem temple 2 years later, the taking down of the Essene temple, and then the end of the age a couple of years later, and then several years later you got the Bar Kokhba rebellion, and when that finally ended, that pretty much ended everything, and then the great dispersion. So you've got a 150-year period there where all sorts of things happen as a group, kind of. And so we're seeing that today, actually. If you take the 150 years before the year 6000, you had the Balfour Declaration, you had the establishment of Israel in 1948, the taking back of the Temple Mount in 67, and all the other things that have happened, the new priesthood, the practice sacrifices that have started up. So all those things are going in process.
So the year 6000, what Gregorian year would that be?
2075.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because that
would be the year 6000.
Okay. So let me ask you this question, and again, thinking out loud here, is so ultimately, if we're comparing what we've experienced in reality, in the sense of the Christian era, from a Christian perspective, we would recognize theologically that the age of grace began at Pentecost, right? And and we're coming up on that 2,000 years. Here again, we're 9 years short, or so, 8 to 9 years short. So, does that make any difference in the sense of understanding that the age of grace truly, now not in an unseen way, but in a practical way, truly began at the time after Jesus' death and resurrection?
I would think it could, and I think it depends on how you use the term. Like, for instance, I know in a lot of the church fathers, they talk about how the Antichrist persecutes us, the believers, the church. And everybody says, oh, well, that's got to be, post-trib rapture type stuff. And when you look at the way they use the church, they're talking about believers. They actually define it from Abraham forward. So when they say church, and that's not how we use church,
Right.
and I'm not saying you're right or wrong, but they mean believers, okay? And so when we
Like historically, even all the way back.
Right.
Okay.
So when we say the age of grace, you and I are talking about the church age. And I think they're talking about the age of grace on a calendar, which may be different. So the church age and their age of grace might be different than what we refer to as the church age.
So yeah, anything you want to add to that?
Oh no, that's exactly right. So you ask any Christian nowadays, like how long is the church age, and they'd say, well, it's been about 2,000 years, but we don't know how long it's going to last. It could be another 6,000 years. But if you were to ask an Essene the same question, when they hear age, they're thinking a 2,000 year period specifically. So they would just say 2,000 years. So yeah, it just depends on how we use the terms.
Yeah, because obviously, even in terms of the Torah as it relates to the 613 commands, that came with Moses.
Yeah.
In 1400 BC, 1445, 1444 BC. So that's certainly many centuries after Abraham.
Right.
And so to have it be super tight like that,
Exactly.
it's hard to believe that the Torah began with Abraham.
No, it's still the age of Torah even before the Torah came to be, because the age of Torah would have started with the call of Abraham, but it was again setting up everything that needed to be for that age to operate and work. So there's a lot of different prophecies and different ways on how things can be, when things can happen within certain ages, but it's like, what is that period mostly known for? That's the age of Torah.
As a matter of fact, according to some of the manuscripts, it talks about the age of Torah or teaching is supposed to start with the guy that starts the group of people.
The whole movement, yeah.
So Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob kind of are the ones that started Israel, and the nation of Israel would bring Messiah. So that's the start of the age of Torah. And when you look at their chronology, the call of Abraham when he was 52, not when he went down to Canaan, but when he was called, actually was the year 2000 on their calendar. So that hit exactly at the end of an age.
So so here we're talking about we're coming up on the year 2025. We're got 6 months left to 24 or so, 7 months left. Then what's significant then in the sense of trying to explain the Essene calendar? What's happening? Let's go to March of 2025, spring equinox. Let's talk about what is significant about that.
It begins this next March begins the 50th year of this Jubilee period. And then the following year is the last generation or the last Jubilee before that. So we should start seeing a lot of prophecy fulfilled. And we have seen things that we've never seen before, like Iran actually attacking Israel. That's prophesied in several scrolls and in scriptures, but we've never seen that before. And this was short-lived, but it's not the only time this is going to happen, because there's some great details in that. We've seen a lot of things happen with Israel, and we will begin to see a lot of wars, a lot of expansion, a lot of different things. Zephaniah, Obadiah talks about the time when they colonized the Negev, they take back Gaza, they control Lebanon up to Zarephath, which is the 6 miles north of the Litani River, which is where they're saying they're going to take and control that now as part of the... Now, whether that actually happens or whether it happens and some political figure later on gives the land back, which has happened multiple times, either way we see it in prophecy. So there's a lot of interesting things happening.
Anything, Josh?
I think he covered it.
So, I'm just going to, I know what all of you are thinking out there, and I'm going to be your advocate right now, okay? Now, I don't want to believe that we have until 2075, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That,
Well, that's just till the beginning of the millennium.
right.
So we got a tribulation, we have all sorts of prophecies that need to be fulfilled in that time, and they could all come early, because there's, again, it's perfectly reasonable to have the end of the tribulation and still have some decades before the next age starts, and because there might be things that need to be done. Again, how long does it take for Jesus to judge everybody at that time? How long does it take to build the temple and for people to, beat their swords into plowshares and to get the word around the whole world? This is the way that things are now. How long does it take to build that temple in that city?
Like you're talking like the millennial temple.
Yeah, the millennial, that we read about in Ezekiel. Like, how long does all of that take? I don't think it's going to be the day that Jesus plants his feet on the ground, all of a sudden this stuff is miraculously just there. It could be, and I don't know for sure, again, because there's a lot of different ways this could play out, but it could be that takes time. And again, another option is you could have an early rapture and a later tribulation. And you could have, because the rapture isn't what starts the tribulation. It's the covenant, the signing of the confirmation of the covenant with many is what starts the tribulation. So there's a theory out there that it's possible you could have the rapture happen, and you could have years in between that and the tribulation. So that's a possibility as well. I'm like you. I don't want to believe that we have to wait until I'll be 90 years old if I make it that long. So there are different ways, and it might be that, but there are ways to look at it where there's nothing preventing the rapture from happening immediately today before we even finish this interview. There's nothing preventing that. And then you can still have all of those prophecies happen within that period and still have the calendar make sense. Or maybe Jesus was just literally, I'm going to cut the days short and we're not going to wait till 2075. So there's God can do whatever he wants. But I think the consistent view would be to look at 2075, 2076 to be the time where everything is put in place, everything is finished, where we can start the first day of the millennial reign. Everything's done. Temples built, cities built. Everybody knows the new rules. They know the festivals. All the other nations know that they got to come up for tabernacles, and just everything's done. And I would think just practically that's probably going to take some time to set up. I don't think it's going to be able to be done the last day of the tribulation. But, again, there's different ways to look at it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The whole idea of the scripture says that those days will be cut short. Now, that might be 5 days, or it might be days like a couple of decades.
Could it be 5 decades? Could it be a whole jubilee cut short?
I would assume. I wouldn't think it'd be a whole jubilee. Of course, if that's the case, the rapture should have happened a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
So no, right. I guess not.
Because you start thinking about, again, I love, we're not date setting here, but it's fun to speculate, isn't it?
Sure.
I mean, no one's setting a date, but it's fun to think out loud about the possibilities, and we're all to be. And no matter what we decide today or not figure out or whatever, we're still going to get up tomorrow and do the Lord's work. Okay, no one's quitting their jobs. I find it. Go ahead.
I think one point that we need to remember too is we're talking about calendar systems, which may or may not be 100% accurate. If we looked at the modern Jewish calendar and tried to pinpoint the year 6000, it's over 220 years away.
Yeah.
I'd much rather have it be 50 years instead of 220.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at the Gregorian calendar, I think we missed it by 24 years.
Yeah,
So it's just like, it's a calendar system.
Well, and that's kind of what I look at too is, again, we are, when Pope Gregory, again, Gregorian, when he's looking at, the Julian calendar, the Roman calendar, and then he starts like, we need to make this a little bit better, at least Christianize it, right? Certainly that's what he did as a Catholic. Well, he looked back and he could see there were some discrepancies. I think he dropped like 13 days or 16 days off of. He's like, well, this doesn't work. So we're going to evaporate those and we're going to squeeze it all together. Which again, that's the nature of looking at different calendar systems. Egyptians used to have a 10-day week. I mean, you have stuff like that. So I think what I look at is, that's what I was leading up to. Well, if the 32-33 date of Jesus' death and resurrection is relatively accurate, which I think most scholars would recognize that's true, then we're coming up on an age ending.
Yeah.
So even if it's not necessarily connected to the specifics of the Essene calendar, their idea of what an age would be as 2,000 years. And in my mind, I like the idea much better. I'm sorry, guys. No offense.
Me
no
too.
offense. I like the idea of thinking, which again, it's not a prophecy by any means, of thinking that the church age, the church had an opportunity to evangelize the world for a full age. And that would end roughly around 32 or 33 AD.
Yeah, Jesus might come back in that year to finish what he started when, and there's still time for the tribulation before that. I mean, and if that's the case, man, the rapture should be coming up pretty soon.
Because what I find fascinating is going back to some of the other stuff that you and I have talked before, Josh, about even Apophis and thinking in terms not so much of the 2029 date but of the 2036 date.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting too, that, again, I don't think we could prove that Apophis arrives at 3.5 years into the tribulation to that level of specificity. But if we were to go with that as a theory, I know talking to you and Derek and even Tom was, then you subtract 3.5 years roughly, that brings you to the fall of 2025.
Yeah, it does.
So you think, oh, wow. But if we were to look at it differently in the sense of a 33 date or 32 with that 2036, in the middle of 2036, and you take 3.5 off of that, it brings you back.
Works.
It brings you back. If Apophis was to hit the earth, hypothetically in 2036, because even Neil deGrasse Tyson, I have a clip from him not too long ago where he describes that the 2029 arrival of Apophis. He said, he specifically, there's this keyhole, this is the language that we use, and if it comes through and it's supposed to come at under 20,000, around 20,000 miles near the surface of the earth in 2029. Well, the moon's at 240,000. So the way he was describing it was, if it comes through this keyhole, it's going to affect the trajectory, the orbital trajectory of the Apophis, so that when it comes back, this is his words.
Yeah.
Secular guy, he's not a Christian. He said, if it comes through this keyhole, the 600-mile keyhole in 2029 and just scrapes us, it will hit us in 2036.
Yeah.
I found that really amazing that he was willing to say that publicly, because he's got a lot at stake in his mindset. But again, that idea would then fit with a 2033.
The dates still work.
The dates work.
Yeah.
Which gives me some hope that I won't be. I was born in 1974. So
You're still young.
Well, at the end of it, I'll be 102, gentlemen.
I was born in '84, so.
Okay, so you'll be a little younger. You'll be a little younger than me.
You're both young. I was born in 60. When was I born? It's been so long. 65.
You're 65.
Yeah, 1965.
Oh, wow.
So we got 20 years apart,
Yeah.
10 years apart. Yeah, so you'll be 110, roughly.
If I do the Essene diet and use the herbal medicine just right, I might still be here. Well, I think it's interesting, no matter how you look at it, all those dates, the speculations, you notice it's all in the last Jubilee, which is in the last generation according to the scrolls.
Yeah.
Well, there's even another one, a 2068 date, and that's 7 years from 2075.
It really is, the 2068 Apophis date. So, I mean, needless to say, I think all of us, regardless of whether we look at the Essene calendar, where we look at anything else, the average person, I mean, come on, guys, the average person that is just all of us, here we are, thinking about the world. I think about and when I mean the average person, I'm thinking about, not in an academic sense. I don't really mean it that way. I just mean like my brothers or my sisters, the average American out there that's sitting there just living life and not necessarily focused on prophecy. They're looking around and they're going, man, the world's changed.
Yeah.
Something has changed. And so when we see this, and we see Israel becoming a nation in 1948, them controlling the old city in 1967 in Jerusalem. We are not. This isn't. I don't see. Oh well, Jesus will come back in 1,000 years. No, the fact that God brought Israel back in 1948 was the big sign that we are approaching the end of the age. And now, of course, we've seen a prophecy begin to unfold. So, as we look, we don't even need the Essene calendar to tell us that, right?
That's right.
We can just look around and say, yes, here we are. But then to have some of these other calendars come and they seem very consistent is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting too, because according to the Essenes, at the end of every age, there's always an apostasy. So in the first age, there's the Tower of Babel incident. Second age, we got everything with Jesus and the Pharisees, and there was clearly apostasy going on there. And then you look at if this is the end of our age, you look at the world today, this is so different than any other time in history, just with the technology that we have. I mean, and it's almost hard to realize it because we've been born into it, so it just seems normal to us. But human beings, as far as we know, have never lived like this. Like, this is so weird and different, and it's brought up so much like debauchery and really you'd call it apostasy. Like, it's brought up so much opportunities for more evil, more than we've ever seen in the history of the world. And to me, it's like, that's too weird to just not be anything. Like, why is it now, all of a sudden, that we have this big technological revolution? I mean, it wasn't that long ago we were still using horses and carriages and stuff. And why is it now? I mean, why couldn't the Greeks have done that? They could have. They were smart, they had math and everything. And any other nation could have done that at any other time, but it was like there was something restraining it, charged word, but and it seems like that whatever that restraining is kind of lifting, and all of a sudden we live in this crazy weird world, and it's just we're in a place, especially now, where you cannot believe anything. We have more evidence for things than we've ever had before. We got video evidence, and nobody ever had that before. But you can't believe anything you see on TV. You can't believe any video you see. If you see a video of Donald Trump saying something, you don't know if it's a deep fake or if that was actually real. And that's like the world we're in now. I mean, again, I'm only like 40 years old, but it's so different from the 80s. I mean, we didn't have any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And but now, I mean, and it's exponentially, it's getting faster and faster and faster, to the point where every year doesn't feel anything like the last. So for that to be just nothing and just to be business as usual, it's not significant at all. I'm not buying it. I think we're at the end of an age here, and I think this kind of thing is what we would expect.
I think we have these are those correspondences that come to play, where we can look around. Again, the average person knows that that the world has changed. Again, even unbelievers are, what in the world? What has happened, especially to our country and other things? All the wokeness, all the gender confusion. I mean, this is crazy stuff. And then to have these other convergences of the calendars come into be. If you want more information on it, certainly go to prophecywatchers.com. Check out our bookstore. Both of these guys are on there, and we carry all of your material.
Yeah, I should mention too, my new book, the super expanded version, 712 pages. It's going to be available at prophecywatchers.com. And again, I'm only a few days away from the launch. It could be by the time this airs, it might already be out. So people should check out prophecywatchers.com and keep checking every day, because it's going to be on there soon.
Yeah, and we'll definitely come back and do a one-on-one interview for sure on that. And once I get my greedy little hands on it and to do it. And so, both of you guys kind of share, in addition to, obviously you've joined us here, which we're excited about. But where can people find out more information about what you're doing?
Oh, sure. Well, my other website is dailyrenegade.com, and that's a place where I put all of my videos. I talk a lot about Dead Sea Scroll stuff, and then also like quantum physics, CERN, prophecy, anything related to prophecy I talk about. That's on dailyrenegade.com, and I'm also on YouTube, but I like using the website, because on the website I can say whatever I want. I don't have to deal with censorship issues. So there's that. I'm also on Facebook, and pretty much anywhere that people want to try to find me, they can find me there. But yeah, the main other website is dailyrenegade.com.
Ken, how do people find you?
I'm at biblefacts.org. We do a live Monday teaching on YouTube, which is doing very well. And like you, I try to give out as much information I can, saying it the right way, so I won't get in any trouble. But we do have a private network at biblefacts.org, so we can come there and speak freely and discuss things. So it's getting really interesting.
Yeah, it really is. I know you just got a new book, and Ken has a new book, Ancient Prophecies from the Dead Sea Scrolls. You'll see more about that in other programs that we've already recorded. Any other projects you guys are working on? I mean, you guys are just, I always hate to say, it's like, man, I just got done with this. But any other things in the works, Ken?
Yeah, I'm doing a couple things. This is probably the last big effort of Dead Sea Scrolls, the prophetic part anyway. There's other things to look at. But now that I've got the Church Fathers and the Dead Sea Scrolls halfway straight in my mind, I want to put together a master prophecy book. Bible prophecy, Dead Sea Scroll prophecy, and others with some charts, photos, and stuff like that. And I think that would really open up
How they coincide with each other.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm going through all of my previous books, and I'm updating and expanding all of them because I write on a lot of different topics, all pretty much relating to prophecy. But I find it so fascinating. I keep up with this stuff and keep notes, and I've realized that like even the quantum physics books that I have out there, I have so much more information on that now. So I'm going to be, that's probably going to be my next project after this Forgotten Prophecies of the Dead Sea Scrolls book. I'm going to take everything that I've written about quantum physics, CERN, everything, compile it all together, add a bunch of new information that I've come up with in the years since, up to present day, and put out one expanded version of all that for people. And then you and I are working on a documentary together about the pre-trib rapture, and I'm really excited about that. So we're doing that, doing a lot of stuff here at Prophecy Watchers, and then as far as after that, the quantum physics CERN book, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what the Lord has in store.
Amen to that. Well, this has been great. I hope you've enjoyed our conversations. Again, remind you to join us. We're going to be in Colorado Springs here in June. Ask you to join us or join us through live stream. It'll be a great time. Lots of speakers coming up. And as we know, things are changing so fast. That's why there's so many books to be written, because they almost become out of date very quickly. There's so much information happening. So appreciate you watching today. Hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we'll see you next time.
Greetings from the Prophecy Watchers podcast. I'm Karen, and I have a great suggestion that will put you on the path to be a Bible prophecy expert. Have you heard about our monthly magazine, The Prophecy Watcher? For a limited time, you can become a subscriber to either the print or the digital version of the magazine and receive 10 cutting-edge bonus DVDs. Just visit our website at prophecywatchers.com or click on the link in the description to see what God has planned for your future, straight from the pages of the Bible.